think I'm talking, maybe? Awesome. Okay, so I've been around the community for a while. Sean pretty much said, we're having a conference. I said, oh, I'll speak. Crazy idea. So, software design patterns. A quick run through of, just in case anyone doesn't know who I am. That's me. There is a monkey in the background. Nick didn't believe me yesterday. Just proof. So I work for a company called CrowdLab, based in Leicester in the UK. Mostly working with Rails now, but we do still have a bit of PHP in the background. Leicester, smack bang in the middle of the country, about the furthest from the beach that you can get. It's going to click again. I also instruct climbing in my spare time, and I do a lot of stuff with the Scouts as well. Just my extra sides. And obviously, Laravel, core team. Funny phrase, a few of us in there. Taylor does all the work. So I was looking back through my history. 1.5.9 I came on. That's back in 2011. Mostly just sitting there looking through all of Taylor's commits and saying, why are you doing that? Are you sure you want to do that? I think he got sick of it by the end of 3. He had Dale to do that for 4 instead. And a lot of time spent in the community, on the forums, IRC, everywhere. Dale still owes me 9,000 support points. It has got bigger. So, software design patterns. We all use them. We don't necessarily all know that we use them. Nice. This is probably the only time I shall read this. Every pattern describes a problem. It occurs over and over and over again. We have to describe the solution. We need to give it a name. But when we use it, we can use it again and again, differently every single time. This guy wasn't actually talking about software patterns either when he was talking. He was describing systems as a slightly wider general. There are 2 big books that have helped me get into patterns. I'm a really technical person, so I prefer this one, Gang of 4, wrote most of it. It's a very technical side. For those that are less technical, we've got this one as well. If you want to know anything about patterns and you'd rather hit a textbook, these are my 2 suggestions. Patterns. We've got loads of them in Laravel. These are the ones I managed to pick out as I was searching through. Most of them are normal ones, common ones. Anybody in there recognize any of these? Anybody here used the command pattern before, perhaps? Taylor definitely has. Doesn't know it, but... strategies, builders, a lot of them. I haven't got time to talk about all of them, but go search, go dig, you will find them all. So, fairly technical talk. I want to do just a couple of notations for you, just so you're aware of what's going on. This is what a class looks like. Class name at the top, methods in the middle, all the variables at the bottom. If we're subclassing, so inheriting, we just stick a little triangle in the middle, nice and simple. Abstract classes and abstract methods, I'll talk about what they are in a minute, but everything's in italics. So if it's abstract, italics. Instances, I don't think I've got too many of these in my talk, but if we instantiate anything, nice dotted line across to it. And then the last one on here, pseudocode. So any examples of what something's doing is going to appear in a little kind of curly page turn thing over on the side. Building blocks. So every pattern pretty much needs to have 1 of 2 building blocks in it. Either an interface, so we write these, something like that in PHP, and actually, you know, lovely example out of Laravel. They have no body, so the entire thing is abstract, but when you implement something, you must provide every single function body. You can't just skip 1 or 2 of them. What it means is if we say, oh, I'm expecting a user interface somewhere, it doesn't matter what the actual class is, we know what functions it's going to have, what properties. The other one are abstracts. We don't use these so much in PHP, but you can have abstract classes and abstract functions on them. These ones are concrete, they're real classes, but they need extending rather than implementing. So you can only have 1 abstract in your inheritance tree. I think this was about the only example I found in Laravel of one of these. Or I think I had a couple of statistics on these as well. There we go. 14 abstract classes in Laravel out of 128 in the vendor folder in total. So nice small number there. We'll start off with a nice simple pattern. Everyone has come across an iterator, even if they don't know it. We use these for just going over a list. So the formal pattern, all the funky dotted lines everywhere. We have a list, we have an iterator. The idea is not to put the iterator code in the list. We don't need to bloat it with all of that extra functionality, but we let the list decide how to create its iterator. The iterator itself simply has how to get to the next item, how to get to the first item, whether we're at the end of the list or not, and what the current item is. Nice and simple. PHP actually has loads of these baked in. This is PHP's base iterator class. So it asks you for a current, key, next, rewind, valid. Very similar. You've got quite a lot of concrete examples of these in PHP as well. So there's an array iterator, a limit iterator, and all these kind of things. So you don't even have to start building your own ones. These are all there. And in fact, in Laravel, we don't have any iterators themselves. A couple of aggregates that provide iterators. And then they actually just make array iterators out of PHP stuff and just get on with it that way. So nice and simple. I'm going to way run out of time. No. Observers. So, okay, nice, simple ones again. Most of our observers in Laravel are event stuff. But here's the formal pattern. We've got a subject, so something that we want to listen to, monitor for updates, most of our models perhaps. Rather than putting in some horrible code in the middle that kind of lets us hook in and stuff like that, we've got a nice pattern that lets us do it all in one go. The observer literally has one function on it. We attach them onto the subject, and whenever the subject does something, loops through all of its observers, just calls the function on it. So in Laravel, our event dispatcher. This is system-wide rather than inside anything in particular, and we've got a bunch of named things that we can listen for. So we say, I want to listen to user updating or user saving and things like that. And then the dispatcher itself, when the event gets fired out of the model, runs through all the listeners. We don't actually have the handler interface because it's been written so flexibly that we can't interface it. You can change whether you actually call handle or whether you want to call update me or whatever you want the handle function to be as well in Laravel. So we never actually see that interface anywhere in the code. So it means tracking it down is actually a little bit awkward. But it's not a big problem. And they're used everywhere. All your event fires, all your event listens, a lot of the 404 handling, 500 handling, all of that, all built on top of our one dispatcher. And I had a little example. This came out of the docs as well. Login handler, listen for it, and fire for it. Nice and simple. Racing through already. I've only got 6 of these. Singletons. Okay, so I asked on IRC last week or the week before which patterns people wanted to hear about, and they wanted a nice comparison between a singleton and a facade. So the singleton pattern, single point of interface into a function. We'd only want one instance of it ever. So pattern here we've got static get instance function that returns the instance. It often makes the instance as well if it doesn't already exist. You find in the formal sense that the constructor's private, so you can never actually try and make an instance of a singleton from the outside. Although our singletons that do exist in Laravel, they are all public constructors. The reason for this is most likely testing. If you need to keep making up loads of instances of things to test its functionality, and the constructor's private, you're going to struggle. One example that I managed to find, the alias loader. This is buried deep in the foundations of Illuminate. And we use this just to load in, load out class aliases so that we're not using PHP's interface directly. The Multiton, very, very similar to a singleton. Nice and simple. The only difference pretty much is the key we've got. So in this case, we're actually having a collection of singletons almost, and they're all ever so slightly different by a key. So I always want to get the same one back for that given key, so we can pass the key in every time. Again, the simple pseudocode says we return it. It'll probably create it first time as well. Not quite as Multiton, nearest thing Laravel's got to it, but the database manager, every time you ask it for a connection, it either looks at the default name and returns that one back out for you, or if you've got more databases configured, you can go in and you can say, give me that one. It does the same job for us pretty much. Facade. So the big one, there is loads of these in Laravel. I don't know if I wrote down how many. No. There are. So this is what a facade looks like formally. The idea is that we want to turn a complex system into a simple interface. So we make a facade on the outside, simple functions on there, and then that has to worry about how to connect up all the internal workings. Some of the internal workings take a while to read your way around, trying to remember all the names, the different things. So perfect things here. Laravel has a base facade class that makes, yep. Got a nice facade accessor on it, and then you can define extra operations. This hooks straight through the IOC. And as soon as you say, I want the HTML thing out of the IOC, when you call the HTML facade, it then knows that's where I'm going. So it does a lot of the hard work for us as well. Some examples. So the input one, nice and simple, extends from the facade. It goes off and actually it hooks up with request. Nice and interesting one there. But it also adds an extra function in there for get, which again goes through request, but it's another name when we're actually looking at what we want from request. So it's just making that one step easier for us. We've got the root. This actually hooks up with a router class instead. And this also adds is and uses. If you look on the router class, you'll find current root is and current root uses instead. So just making things that little bit simpler. Response. So this one does all sorts of crazy things off everywhere. But this is making it nice and easy to make all sorts of different types of downloads, streams, JSONs, and the views. And then string. String is not a facade. I had a chat with Taylor about this a couple of months ago. Nothing changes. You put something into the string input, you're going to get something consistent out, with the exception of the random stuff. So you don't need to hot swap this one so much. So there was no need for it to go in there like that. It does have some external dependencies. It does hook out into other things as well. Nice and simple. Most of our facades go through the IOC, and they're actually hooking up to what's best described as singletons, but they're not formally singletons. So you're always accessing the same interface every single time, the same instance every single time. Facade versus singleton. This is where I have to look at my notes as well for this one. They are very different. The facade provides one interface to, in the internals, many classes, whereas a singleton is used to provide a point of access to one thing. Yeah, and again, I said most facades in Laravel access loose singletons through the IOC. Go on, Decorator. Okay, so I had a scour through Laravel for a decorator. I couldn't find one, bizarrely enough, but I was so determined to put this in the talk anyway. Decorators. So the idea here is that best example I found, you've got a cup of coffee that you want to buy. That's going to be our component. And then we're going to start adding extra things onto it, like cream, sugar, vanilla, biscuits, all those extra things that you get. So our one operation here might be cost. The cost of a cup of coffee, nice and simple. I don't know, €1 for the sake of simplicity. Every decorator we bolt on, so we add cream on, we add vanilla on, we add a biscuit on. It can modify the cost, but it keeps the interface going through the component the same all the time. So it looks and feels like a coffee the whole while, but it has been changed slightly every time. So the very formal way, the decorator, normally in the constructor, would take the actual concrete component and it would delegate all of the operations back up through to the component there. And you can either add state or add operations, and they'd normally be through the normal interface rather than adding extra stuff in. I said I didn't find one in Laravel, but the BootstrapPresenter would be quite easy to turn into one. At the moment, we wrap the paginator with the BootstrapPresenter, and then we use the two of them independently in our views, so we can get the next and the previous links in a a bootstrap kind of way. It wouldn't be overly hard, especially with Sean's base model for presenters and decorators, to actually then extend the paginator and just have that one interface then. We can add our extra functions in there too, that's fine. So there you go, a nice suggestion for anybody looking to add Bootstrap stuff in the future. So we're into my less pretty stuff now. I didn't think I'd rattle through those quite so quickly. As I was looking around, I found quite a lot of other examples of all sorts of patterns, and these are the ones you guys can go and have a look at later or research through. So the repository, the idea actually that our models shouldn't be responsible for how we access the data, should be responsible for being that model. I go for the cup of coffee. The coffee shouldn't know about where the coffee machine is and how to use it. So we need to make some repositories for them. Active record makes this a little bit awkward for us, or too convenient perhaps. So all of our loading is done through our model classes as well. The idea here, you could separate them out, you can have all the stuff out of the way. And there's a few more examples of this in Laravel, but these were the two big ones that came out, the cache repository, the config repository. It also means we can swap them out quite easily. We could move config repository, and we can start using other things for it. The builder. We've got a lot of manager classes in Laravel. Someone was saying to me, if you're writing your own code and you come across a manager, it's probably getting too complicated already. They generally know how to build other things. That's all they're there for, really. And occasionally just handling interface between a couple of things as well. Loads of examples, they run off the bottom of the screen a bit as well. Factories, builders will use them. We've got a couple of managers still scattered around that have got factories on them as well, but the factory is responsible for how to make something rather than how to build complicated things. And the idea is that the top level can then go off and build one of many different subclasses. Service providers. So if you've ever tried writing a package for Laravel 4, you've probably come across the service providers. Best place to start digging, if you want to dig, is in the support. There's a base service provider class in there. Without these, the IOC kind of just doesn't do anything anymore. This hooks up all the different stuff. It was quite awkward to find an example out of the actual Gang of 4 book that maps up to the service provider. Strategies. So to save anyone from asking me later, this is probably my favourite pattern. Everyone has to have a favourite pattern. The idea that you can switch in and out an interface. So cache and config, brilliant examples. The cache one, we have one interface for how to store cache, and then we have loads of concrete examples of that. So we've got Redis, we've got memcache, we've got files, we've got database, we've got memory, or array, I think it is. And it means that you can switch that out live as well, and the interface maintains the same. It all looks the same on the outside. The database uses it all throughout both of its levels of builders and grammars. So the query side and the schema side has got loads of them in there as well. The translations and the views again. So if you wanted to start swapping out things, really easy. You can put all your translations in the database, provide a few functions, it's done, nice and simple. How am I doing? I've already run out of time. That was way too fast. Go on, there must be at least one. If you stick your hands up, the guys with the mics will come and find you. And if not, then we're going for coffee really early.
I have a question. Can I start?
Go for it.
I'm Justin.
Hi, Justin.
Is there, can you guys hear me okay? There we go. Is there a common pattern when you're looking at other developers' code where you're seeing they're missing an opportunity to use one of these patterns and they've kind of like missed the point and they should be doing it this way? Or is there a common case that you see that's being missed often that could be corrected?
If I go all the way back to the Iterator, I can see a lot of people that just extend Iterator straight onto their lists. Perfect example actually where the pattern was designed to separate the functionality out. So you're not bloating your list functions, your list classes, but also actually there's not enough presenters and decorators going around the web either. a lot of people using maybe helper functions for them or calling off to other classes in the middle of their views, where actually you could just be wrapping your models and calling the same interface just to change that functionality just that little bit.
Thank you.
Wow. I was either really good or you're all really confused.
Man, I'm a designer and I asked that question, so you guys have got to have something.
Brilliant. That's me.